Hey everyone, I was just getting ready for a couple events I'm attending tonight. Um, but on my mind all day has been a meeting I attended with a group that focuses on restorative justice, which is a particular ethos or strategy for criminal justice reform, which is a very serious issue in our state today. I haven't discussed it much so far in this campaign, um, but our state's prison system and criminal justice system has really deep inequitable flaws that really have to be addressed by our state leaders. One gentleman today was talking about a man that he knows in prison who's been there for 50 years. Um, and the crime that he committed was essentially he was the unwilling and unwitting accomplice to somebody else's crime. Essentially, he was in the car when a friend of his hopped out of the car and ran off into a building, committed a crime unseen, off screen, and then ran back. And in a panic, that this gentleman fled the scene. He didn't understand what was happening. He was afraid, so he fled. And he's been paying for that mistake for the better part of a lifetime now. And he just learned that he will not be given the opportunity to seek a commutation, basically to get out of prison after 50 years paying for that mistake. And that is not a one-off example. That happens all the time. Our state's parole and commutation system, and really the prison system generally, like I said, has not been seriously reformed by our leaders for quite some time, and it's starting to show. Coincidentally, just today, the Pennsylvania Capital Star released an article about the compassionate release program, which essentially allows very seriously ill incarcerated people who are toward basically at the end of their lives, often geriatric, often bedridden, and it gives them the opportunity to leave the prison system, pursue medical care or palliative care outside of the prison system, and essentially experience the end of their life outside of a cell. And the problems with this program are not new. There was actually a report by an investigative state agency in 2005 that said all of the ways that it could be improved. No action was taken in the past 2 decades, and now the data's backing it up. In the past 15 years, only about 50 people have been granted compassionate release, only about 3 per year. And spoiler alert, there are a lot more ill people and terminally ill people in our state prison than 3 per year. People are literally dying while they're waiting for a hearing to see if they'll be allowed to be granted this compassionate release. And it's a very serious issue. I think this is a population that doesn't get a lot of attention. It doesn't get a lot of sympathy, frankly. A lot of people think, oh, prisons, that's where the bad guys are, that, criminals, they aren't very sympathetic characters. But guess what? They're also Pennsylvanians. They're also people. They also have rights, and they need protections. They need to be properly treated and protected under the law, and that's not happening with our current state leadership. Just earlier this year, there was a pretty prominent example of this, wherein a gentleman was appointed to the parole board, which is a very small board. I want to say 5 people, and they basically decide who gets parole, who gets commuted, and who doesn't, who gets to stay in prison. And this gentleman, these people are appointed by the governor, and then they're approved by the state senate. So there's a lot of power that our elected state senators have on this system. And essentially, this gentleman had a long history of working with prosecutors and arguing that people cannot be reformed, that it's impossible. He even argued in several cases that minors, literally 11-year-olds, 13-year-olds, should be tried as adults and sentenced as adults because they cannot be reformed. They cannot learn from their mistakes. It is impossible. So they should be sentenced as adults, and they should be shipped off to prison, this 11-year-olds. And in fact, a lot of the cases that he worked on were subsequently thrown out by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court because they're obvious violations of the Fifth Amendment rights, basic civil liberties. Like, you're trying an 11-year-old as an adult. What are you, insane? What are you, a crazy person? And this is somebody who is now in charge of deciding whether people should be given parole and commutation. This is somebody who doesn't believe that reform is possible, and now he's in charge of deciding whether individuals have been reformed. So you can kind of guess what kind of decisions he's going to be making there. And for commutation, it has to be unanimous. Everybody on the parole board has to agree. And so if there's one bad apple for the entire time that he's on that board, and he was approved by the state senate, nobody's going to leave. ever, our state prison system, and it's expanding. We're like the most incarcerated country in the nation, and that includes like Iran and Russia and, places that are not supposed to be democracies. And it's no different here. And we're holding them longer and longer, and they're getting older and older and sicker. And even from a policy perspective, this is a huge drain on government resources, caring for these seriously ill, incarcerated people who have been there their entire lives. It's a mess. It's broken, and our state leaders don't seem to particularly care. They don't seem really to be focused on that issue. And it's not one that I'm an expert on. I'm very new to this area. I'm certainly no expert in criminal justice reform or restorative justice or anything like that. I'm very much learning. But it's a basic, I think it's a basic smell test for a leader. Do they care about their constituents, even if their constituents aren't sympathetic to the average person, even if their constituents are incarcerated people? Do they care? Do they still care about their rights and their humanity? So this is something I'm going to be learning a lot more on. I'm going to be reading more on.